Welcome back. In this tutorial, we're going to show you the basics of just drawing some simple shapes in Inkscape that we can then later on use to make more complex shapes to cut out on the laser cutter or our vinyl cutting machine. So when you're in Inkscape, again, Inkscape's a vector graphics program, so you're pretty much designing things based on mathematical equations. So if you look on the left, there's a bunch of tools. You kind of follow the mouse over here to let you draw different types of shapes. The main ones we're going to use are the kind of rectangle tool, circle tool, other shape tool, and the pen tool, and also the text tool. So again, I'm sure you've used these in a lot of our programs. You click on the rectangle tool, you click and drag, and it draws a rectangle. Now let me change the color so we can see it a little bit better. Now our rectangle, zoom in, is a little bit different. If you notice, this one already has a curved edge. I must have drawn it before. When you draw a rectangle, it's going to normally start like this. And you notice that one corner and the other corner have little squares. If I grab those, I can resize stuff. The third corner here, though, has a circle. If I grab that, it actually curves the edges of my rectangle. So I can make it a rounded rectangle or a regular rectangle. I can also change this by changing this value here. If you look up to the top, it says RY. That's the radius of it. So I grab that and pull that down there. I could set this to example 0.5, and it makes it, oh, actually typed incorrectly, 0.5, and it makes it a certain size curve. Again, make it bigger, makes it a bigger curve. So I can do that by just freehand dragging it or by clicking over there. Second thing, now let's say, okay, I made a rectangle. Let's say I really wanted to make a square though. Let's get this out of here. So I can use the rectangle tool again. I'm going to set the radius up here to 0 because I don't want. And if I click and drag, it's going to keep making a rectangle. Now I could try to get really close, but there's a trick. If I hold down Control, when I drag it, if you notice the mouse is not in the corner there, it keeps the sides the same and it makes a square. So I hold down Control and move it out. I can click and make my rectangle into a square. Now if I want to make this an exact size, I can always go back, click on it, up on top, there's 4 numbers up here. The X and Y number tells you where this is on the page. For example, if I set this to 0, it's going to jump right to the edge of the page. These 2 numbers, the W and H, I'm sure you can guess, stand for the width and height. And right now they're exactly the same because it's a square. So if I wanted to make this a 5 by 5 square, for example, I could just click on one of these, set it to be 5. Now it turned into a rectangle, make the other one 5. Now it's a 5 by 5 exactly square. So those squares, I know, pretty exciting. Next one, now we can make a circle. So again, the same idea. If I click and drag, I'm going to get an ellipse out of it, and I can make it whatever size I want. I can go back up here, change the size of it just like I did before with the square. And again, as you could probably guess, if I want to make a circle, I just drag it but hold down Control, and it snaps to being a circle of whatever size I want it to be. And the same thing if I go down one more. This is a generic sided thing. If you look on top, right now it has a pentagon and a star. So I can drag this, it'll make a star. Could set the star. If I want to click this, it's a 5-sided pentagon as opposed to a 5-sided star or 5-pointed star. If I want more, so I can make whatever size polygon that I want. If I want to, I can round the edges a little bit by changing this. So these shapes just allow you to make kind of polygon shapes whatever size that you want. And I believe polygons are always, when you make them, they'll always be symmetrical. And if later on, if you want to, now once I have these shapes made, I can click on them, grab the corners here, the sides, and I can actually resize them to whatever size I want. So now I can stretch and squish my polygon to whatever size I want. Also, if I click on shapes a second time, I can actually rotate them. If you notice, you click on them once, you have the kind of double arrows in the corners and sides. Click on it again, they turn to these little curvy arrows, which means the rotating a circle doesn't really do anything. But I can rotate things by using those. So those are generic shapes that you can make. We can also make our own custom shapes. Let's get rid of this. So if I go down to the pen tool, not the pencil, but the pen, this lets me draw a line. So if I want to make a custom shape, I can click, 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 click. And as long as I come back to where I started, if you notice there's a square where I started, when I get close, it's going to snap to it, and a little red thing pops up. And I click there, and it now makes a closed shape. I can color it in and do stuff. So I can make my own custom shapes by doing that. If you're trying to trace something, for example, or draw something in freehand, you can do that. So So when you use the pen tool and you click and let go and click and let go, it draws straight lines. I could also draw curves, use the same tool. Instead of click and I let go, then click again, I get a straight line. But if I now click somewhere else and hold it down, I can actually curve my line. So there's a little handle that shows up and I can actually make my line curved, and the kind of length of this handle that describes how curvy the line is, so I can kind of go through and make my own shapes. Now I click again, let go, now it's a straight line, hold down, draws a curve again. So when you hold down, it'll actually draw two curves. It curves the line you're moving, then it's also going to curve the next line. And I can go back to where I started, and now I have this kind of weird looking curvy shape that I drew. So again, that's using the pen tool. You can draw straight lines, and you can draw with that. I think they call them Bezier curves or something like that. And what's nice is I can go back now and edit these. I can resize them like I did before, but also if I use the second, right underneath the arrow over here, use the second arrow tool and click on one of these. If you notice there's little nodes here, they're the spots where I clicked. If I click on those, I can go back and I can recontrol those curves, and I can reshape my object by moving those as well. So when I draw something, I can go back and I can really make some complex things just using some freehand ideas by kind of moving these things around and curving and moving the handles. So again, this is drawing straight lines. Some people call these things splines, the curves, or Bezier curves. They're really the same thing. And the last shape we want to make is we want to make some text. So I'll click on the text tool, just click somewhere. Type something. And again, so now it's an object. This is not a shape right now. It's a text object. I can still resize it. Grab the corners, resize it. If I resize things and hold down Control, it keeps the ratios the same, just like making a square. When you resize something and hold down Control, it keeps the ratio of the height to the width to be the same, so it doesn't squish it. It just makes the whole thing bigger. If I don't hold down Control, it's going to squish it or stretch it or do weird things. If I want to edit my text, I just go back and kind of select it and click on the text tool again. And you notice that the top change, there's all these text options, just like in other programs. You can change the font size inside here. Again, I resized it so it's not really the same font size because I kind of stretched it. You can change the actual font. Inkscape is a little bit slow sometimes loading fonts. It's a weird thing. So if it does that, give it a second. You can see my fonts are scrolling through. I have a lot of fonts on my computer, and it's kind of hanging a second, but I'll eventually get them all in there. Eventually. There, I think I got them all in there. So now if I want to go back and choose something, I don't know, let's see. Say I want to choose that. I can again change it just like you would change a normal font. There are some other options you have. So if I click on this and I hit Control Shift, it's one of our key commands, Control Shift T. Give it a second. There it goes. It brings up the text dialog. So I can also change things inside here. I can kind of go through and scroll through the different fonts up here and change the font size and change some of the orientations there. So you can change the font inside here, or you can change it using the top. Just remember, if you change it in here, you have to actually hit apply. Like I'm doing this, nothing's happening until I eventually find some font that we can actually see. Hit apply, then it changes my font over there. I'm gonna undo that because I like that one better. And again, there's some more options you can kind of play with. You can change stuff in here, but pretty much everything you need to do, you can find either in that dialog or on the top. Like you can change justification so it's centered. You can make things subscript or superscript. This, I believe, increases the line spacing. Let's see what this does. Yeah, it kind of stretches them out so there's different, more length between lines. The same options as most programs. Now, there's one more trick we want to do with text, because sometimes when you're done, you might want to make it into a shape and use it, or especially if you're going to go print it and you have some special font in your computer that you're not sure the school has or the lab has. If you bring this file here as a font, it might not be able to open it correctly. So usually when we're done and I'm ready to go, I'm completely happy with the way my text turned out, I'm going to go to Path, Object to Path, and that just turns my text into a shape. So now if I click on it, they're now, each of these things are their own shapes. If I click on this, they have their little, it kind of made them, let's move this around a little bit or zoom in. It made these into the kind of like those custom shapes you made, where I can actually grab these things and I can now mess with my thing. So just be careful if you change it into a shape, because it does weird things afterwards if you start clicking on stuff. But that's just the basics of making shapes in Inkscape, and you can make a lot of complex objects just out of using the basic shapes.